Howdy ho, folks. Howdy ho. Howdy ho, America and points beyond. Who has power and what are they doing with it? Politics is not a natural act.
That's right.
That's right.
I must admit, I've never heard that one from you.
There's so many feisty fighters against the greedheads and boneheads. So grab a libation, join the conversation. It's the personal side of politics, and it is surprisingly tasty. Hey out there in America and points beyond. Here we are back again. Welcome to the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour. We are back after a little summer hiatus there, but here we are at the old Chat and Chew Cafe, otherwise known as my kitchen table. But we're asking you to pull up a chair and to pour a libation of your choice. Maybe it's a nice beer like I have from the Friends and Allies Brewery. Friends and Allies Brewery. We need more of that, don't we? Friends and Allies Brewery here in Austin, Texas. But maybe you just want some water. Maybe you want some lemonade. Who knows what it is? But join us here. Pour yourself a libation, pull up a chair, and be a part of our conversation here. Deanna Zant is with us, as always. Deanna, hello.
Hello.
There she is. Deanna.
How are you?
Was about to depart for Germany, of all places.
Yeah.
Just a hiatus. She's got family over there. She's going to visit some people there. But tonight she is with us, and she will escort you right to the table here with your questions, insights, observations, jokes. Maybe you got a joke. Who knows? Here we are. And tonight
we know where you're watching from and what you're drinking. And I will be up in the comments. Leave everything in the comments. Questions for Hightower, questions for our guests. Just whatever you got, throw it at me in the comments.
There you go. DZ is available. She answers all questions. A topic of fundamental public need in America is what we're addressing here tonight. The issue of the underlying infrastructure of our economy, of our society, and of our future. Childcare. Something as simple as childcare. We did an issue of the Hightower Lowdown. Here it is in all of its brilliance, actually pink in this particular issue. It's not a red and blue issue, but a practical human need. It says in the banner quote here, will Congress finally fund quality, affordable childcare? And that is our question of the evening. Again, it's not an individual problem. It is a systematic issue for the entirety, the unity, the common good of the U.S. of A. And we've got, among other things, we got three surprises in our discussion tonight. One involving Alabama, one involving World War II, and one involving today's American public and its opinion of what's going on in our society. And to help guide us through all of this, we have a dynamic person, writer, investigative reporter, digger, mother, and a person who has dug into this issue of childcare, and it's, well, the American system of childcare is neither a system nor does it care, and that is what Bryce Covert, a fantastic writer, activist, a former advocate with the Roosevelt Institute, contributor to The Nation magazine, better than which you cannot get, op-ed writer in the New York Times. I've read many of her pieces in there, and a Merit Award winner from the National Women's Political Caucus, who knows more about childcare than the women of our country, and the mother of an adorable 18-month-old child. So, Bryce, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Just put her to bed, so hopefully she's sleeping.
You're right. Coming all the way from her home in Brooklyn, New York. And Bryce was raised just down the road in Long Island. Is that right?
That's right. Yep, out on Long Island. Fantastic.
So here we come. And, I mentioned underlying infrastructure. Bryce, the people opposed to Congress passing a significant child care provision for our country and our people say, well, that's Joe Biden. Joe Biden tried to put that in his infrastructure bill. This childcare is an infrastructure. Bridges are infrastructure. Highways are infrastructure. Sewer systems are infrastructure, but not childcare. What do you say to those?
Well, look, highways are infrastructure, and part of what they do is they connect people and they help facilitate other things in the economy, right? They carry people going to work, they carry goods going to stores, they facilitate the functioning of our whole country. Childcare does the same thing. It is very hard to get to work if your childcare provider is homesick that day and you have no other options. It's going to snarl your day just the way a traffic jam might snarl your commute on your way to the office. So, people want to call it soft infrastructure,
Absolutely.
whatever. It undergirds everything else.
Well, I'll tell you what I will call it, because I went to the source, doing my usual deep investigative digging. I didn't go to the internet because who knows what's being said on there. I went to the Random House Dictionary of the English Language, Volume 2, written in whenever the hell it was. But here it is. Infrastructure, under I, in case you're searching your dictionary. Under I, it says the fundamental facilities and systems serving a country, city, or area. How more fundamental can you get than not taking care of the children of our country? Isn't that basic?
It's extremely basic. And of course, it helps you get to work, but childcare, as you're saying, it's also about children. You get both benefits. You help people work who want to work outside the home. And then you also help develop the next generation who are going to be the workers and the thinkers and the leaders. Quality childcare, quality early education, quality preschool, whatever you want to call it. If they're in a good setting with caring adults, that's going to put them on a much better path. If we provide them something like that. But a lot of kids in America are not in those settings. Most settings are rated less than a B when it comes to quality. It's usually around a C. These are the places that parents are forced to try to choose between.
Well, I want to get back to that rating system there for America, but before going into the dismal numbers of our own system, let me say something that you don't normally hear in context or juxtapose, and that is the state of Alabama and progressive action. Okay, I'm from Texas, so I cannot make fun of any other state for its recalcitrance to deliver the goods for the people. But Alabama, and yet Alabama has devoted itself in the last several years in a substantial way to providing childcare for its people. Tell us that story, Bryce.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, it's not really, as you said in your article, a blue state versus red state issue. You see states like Alabama, also Oklahoma has universal preschool. West Virginia, Senator Joe Manchin's home state, has universal preschool. I think that it comes out of a recognition on a conservative side that this is a workforce development issue. And again, it's two-sided. You are helping workers get to work. That's good for business. The Chamber of Commerce supports childcare investment because it knows full well that you can't hire people and get them to show up to work if they don't have childcare options. But then, of course, you're also investing in this next generation. And I think that's a very conservative idea that we want to invest in children so that they can reach their higher potential, or at least it used to be. So it is something, at least on the state level, that I think people can really come together on. It's like, it all just sort of starts to fall apart at the federal level.
Well, those ideologists get involved and money interests get involved rather than just people talking to each other and talking common sense. Here's an interesting observation. And anthropologists are now beginning to point out that perhaps humankind advanced because there were grandmothers. Right? I mean, grandmothers. Why would that be a factor? Well, because grandmothers could take care of the children,
right,
while the parents went off to work, bringing in food or whatever had to be done out there. So civilization itself and the so-called advanced human race could have a factor in or be a factor of childcare in our society. And you mentioned something, Bryce, about the past. And here is surprise number 2. Alabama was surprise number 1. Surprise number 2 in our conversation tonight is World War II. Tell us about World War II, Bryce.
I think this is my favorite party factoid that I pull out to be popular. Most people don't know that the United States actually had universal childcare during World War II. The men were being shipped off to war in large numbers, and they needed bodies in factories to make all the war machinery. And they started running out basically of childless women. They started with the childless women and there weren't enough. And then they were starting to try to bring mothers in. But then all these awful stories proliferated of children chained to their trailer homes or left in movie theaters. And it really caused a moral outcry. And it was a practical problem. It was a practical wartime problem of infrastructure, interestingly enough. Lawmakers eventually took an infrastructure bill and said, okay, we're going to treat childcare as an wartime infrastructure problem, and we're going to build facilities, we're going to hire teachers, and we're going to staff and run this nationwide network of universal child programs. And it served about 600,000 kids. The mothers loved it. It got huge ratings from the mothers. Studies later on have found that it had huge benefits for the children who attended. And it was super cheap. It was about $10 a day in today's dollars. There was no eligibility criteria. So it didn't matter who you are or why you wanted childcare. You could bring your child. And it was a great success. And then it just was closed up basically when the war was over, and the men started coming home. Activists for children and activists for women's rights tried to keep them around, but in the end, they weren't successful.
Well, we'll get back to that. Here's a picture right here that Deanna has put up of a protest in Brownsville, Texas, of families protesting the fact that the World War II child care infrastructure program was going to be eliminated. So they were saying, if mama can't work, we can't eat. And just this was going on all across the country. The American people knew the value of this. I mean, and you mentioned the war effort, Rosie Riveter, right? Rosie Riveter.
Also, a quick question or quick correction before I take this off the screen again. This is Brownsville, New York, in Brooklyn. So this is where this protest is in the early 50s. And
picky from you New York people.
I got to represent the Brooklyn. You know?
All right, okay.
That's what we do.
I stand corrected. Brownsville, New York. But it would have happened in Brownsville, Texas.
It would have
as well.
Absolutely would have.
They're wearing too much winter outerwear for that to be Texas.
Well,
Look
you're
how
right.
bundled up they are.
Very, very good observation right there. So, but here they were. Rosie Riveter could not have done her riveting if nobody was taking care of the kiddos, providing a system. And as you indicated, Bryce, this was not a kiddie corral. Let's just put them all over here in a place and watch them and feed them and water them. It was an educational program. It was an advancement. As you indicated at the time, it was 50 cents a day that you paid to be a part of this program, and that's less than $10 a day in today's money. And for that 50 cents, you got 12 hours of care. And care was not just monitoring, it was education. And by the way, it included lunch and snacks. It was just common sense at its most basic form. And then the right-wingers came out of World War II after the men came back and said, we got to get them women back in the kitchen. back in the home, and so we can't have this program. And so they abandoned it. Yet there was an effort made again in the under, believe it or not, Richard Nixon to push forward a program for child care for all. And Nixon, I've got a quote here somewhere if I can find it quickly. Yes, Nixon saying, "We must make a national commitment to providing all American children an opportunity for healthful and stimulating development during the first 5 years of life." He was a strong advocate for an early education child care system. But then came the right-wing nutballs taking over the Republican Party, and they began to blast this as anti-family. So the child care program was sacrificed on the altar of family values, if you can possibly comprehend that. I cannot. It's beyond my ability. But people continued to push, and yet we've had setbacks again and again. And I mentioned Nixon, but Democrats as well. Bill Clinton pushed through a welfare program that hurt the child care possibilities for families of America. And doesn't it comes down, Bryce, to a fundamental issue that we so often face, and that is the power of money versus the power of human need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the 1970s under Nixon is really the important turning point culturally for this issue. Yes, we had universal childcare during World War II, and it didn't last beyond the war. And certainly the gender dynamics of that post-war era were not necessarily terribly progressive. But the idea of childcare as an investment in education for young kids was not super controversial. And it was bipartisan. Like you said, Nixon was a big supporter. The bill that Congress considered in the 70s to create universal child care was extremely bipartisan. It sailed through Congress, and everyone expected Nixon to veto it. And the thing that changed is the evangelical right got in the mix. Pat Buchanan whispered in Nixon's ear and said, "You should veto this." And not only did he veto it, but he wrote a scathing veto that called it communism, that said it was going to put government before families, and it's sort of previewing what we started to hear from there on out, that childcare was all about destroying the family, putting government brainwashing, all about the Red Scare. This is where the conversation went, and we got mired in the war over working women. Basically up until very recently have the politics started to change. But what didn't change in all that time is that women continued to go into the paid workforce, and families continued to rely more and more on their income. So the reality on the ground was that has increasingly become clear that you need childcare, and you struggle to find it and afford it. And I think that's finally started to run into our politics. Some politicians, not all, have recognized that this is an issue that's just common sense for American people.
Deanna, what are people saying about this?
Yes, people got a lot to say about this. Also, just a couple before I get to the users, and we got folks out in California. We got a friend in Oklahoma. What's up, Oklahoma? We got some folks representing from Brooklyn, of course. Bryce and I, Brooklyn, So let us know. Always let us know where you're watching from and what your questions and comments are. And also, I just wanted to add a disclaimer. I'm posting a bunch of articles in the comments as we're rolling through here, referencing some of the work that y'all are talking about. And this is for somebody else that I work for. And some of these things are things that Bryce has written for the other people that I work for, which is a really great early learning magazine called Early Learning Nation. And that's earlylearningnation.com. Please check them out. So I just wanted to put that out there. But a lot of people, as we're getting into the politics of this, a lot of people now are wondering, where does childcare, where does preschool stand in the Build Back Better bill? Because it's not really clear. and that's been a difficult conversation. So I leave it back to you all.
Yeah.
Well, I'll toss it to Bryce, but the mission was clear. The argument was clear. We're going to provide childcare for every 3 to 4 year old kiddo, and we're going to provide childcare for affordable childcare for every family. That it will not cost more than a tiny percentage of their income to be a part of this program, because that's how important childcare is. So that was the start. That was the Biden, Ocasio-Cortez, et cetera, proposal, and not just Ocasio-Cortez and the left wing, but the moderate Democrats were on board with this. What happened, Bryce?
What happened?
It's your fault. We're blaming you.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, basically, Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Kristen Sinema happened. I mean, to make a complicated process a little bit less complicated, Democrats need all 50 senators, sorry, not all 50 senators, all the Democrats in the Senate to vote with them on this package. They don't have a margin for error. They can't lose anyone in the party. So that puts them in the bind of having to get every single one on board. Amazingly, basically everyone seems to be on board with much of what was in the plan, including the childcare and the preschool plans. It's these two holdouts that have made life really difficult. And what Democrats are now in the process of doing is basically negotiating with themselves over how to fit all the things they want to do into a tiny box imposed on them by Manchin and Sinema, because they don't want to spend over a certain pretty arbitrary number. And so now they're trying to sort of figure out what stays and what goes. I think the good news for this issue is that Joe Manchin seems to really like universal preschool for 3 and 4 year olds. He, as I mentioned, it's already up and operational in West Virginia. I think he seems to see it as an education issue, not a parental or women's rights issue. But then that viewpoint of not necessarily feeling comfortable with the parent side of things comes into play for childcare, as it has for him with the child tax credit. He is very uncomfortable with giving parents support for parenting without any strings attached. I totally, honestly, I don't know where the childcare part of this stands. It's unclear if it's going to make it in, and if it does, what it's going to look like. There was a while where the progressive wing of the party actually seemed pretty ascendant, and we're trying to push further to make childcare subsidies universal, no income caps at all. I think that's unlikely to survive. So it's probably going to have some kind of means test. It probably just won't last very long, which with childcare is just not the way it works. If you tell states, we're going to give you a lot of money, but we're only going to do it for 3 years, you can't build capacity, and you can't hire enough people, and you can't get enough kids enrolled. So why even bother? So I have a feeling that even if they get something in, it may end up just not really being able to make a dent in the problem we face.
Yeah, no corporation would do that.
Right.
No corporation would invest in something saying, and it's going to last 3 years, and then you're on your own. And Joe Manchin saying, well, you can't have these programs just willy-nilly, just open to anybody for any good. Well, I had one. It was called public education.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much been, me aside, it's pretty much been a benefit to the nation.
Well,
to have public education.
What's wild here is that Manchin and others draw this line between education and childcare. And that's very clear when he says, I support preschool, but I don't support childcare. When the two things at all ages are the same thing. Maybe not college. Maybe we'll let college kids off the hook for not needing supervision. But basically, under that age, you are both investing in the development of children's brains, and you are also keeping them safe from harm while parents are doing other things. That is true in K through 12. That is true in preschool. That is true in childcare, especially when it's what it's supposed to be, which is high quality stimulation for children's development. So The only reason, honestly, to draw that distinction is if you are uncomfortable with women who have young children working outside the home. That is the only difference that I can see.
Bingo. Right.
Yep.
You know,
And that's one of the that's what actually relates to one of the questions that's
Good.
come up is I think someone made the comment that not a lot of people understand how difficult this situation is for parents. And, you know, I recently saw a thing, a stat that said some families are paying more than twice their mortgage for childcare, to be able to work outside, to have both parents working outside the home as a necessity.
It's $13,000, isn't it? A year of childcare?
Yeah.
Going at today's rates?
Yeah.
and might be mediocre childcare at that. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. No. And so I was just wondering if y'all could talk a little bit about what that struggle is, what the childcare workforce seem to be facing, and you know, there's a lot of complicated aspects of this, I think, that aren't entirely clear.
That's an important thing, and Bryce has written about this extensively, and that is that the American system of childcare is actually heavily subsidized, not by the government, not by the people, not by the public. It is heavily subsidized by the people who do the work, who get, embarrassingly, impossibly, untenable low wages. Bryce, talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, childcare providers, I think people assume because it costs so much for parents that they must be making good wages, but they're paid on par with parking lot attendants, fast food chefs. Like they're making $11, $12, $15 an hour.
I saw a thing that said dog walkers get more money. Dog walkers.
Well, and this is part of the problem with the quality is, can you imagine how hard it is to hold on to really good providers if they're being paid that poorly? You can't survive. And if you go into the education system, you can make a much more decent living. So childcare providers are constantly losing workers. There's really high turnover. Right now, it's really bad because who wants to go back to working in a high-risk setting for $11 an hour? The business of childcare, there's just no profit in it. And people say, well, if I'm paying so much, where is all the money going? And the truth is it goes straight into the fixed costs of childcare, that there's just really no room for, scales of efficiency. Children require a certain number of adults to be in the room to keep them safe, especially when they're babies. They really need very intensive, almost one-on-one care. They need food. They need a place to be, which requires rent and utilities. None of those things can really be shaved down. And it's quite expensive to get all those things going. This is why we need the government in the middle here, because parents can't afford more. They're already struggling to pay these bills. Providers can't afford to live this way. They're not making any money. And this is one of the most important things that a child can experience is the childcare setting in their early years. If the government doesn't get in there and make sure providers are paid adequately and parents are off the hook, then we have, to call it a system, like you said, it's just a completely broken system.
I am so angered, to put it mildly, by this issue, because it is so completely unnecessary, and a failure of our leadership, including Democrats or pretend Democrats like Joe Manchin, but even some other meek-hearted Democrats. Failing to stand up for this. I was in politics here in Texas a number of years, elected and in office, I had a power. The office I had the power to regulate pesticides. So we said, what the hell, let's use it for a change. And so that angered the chemical lobbyists, and that angered the Farm Bureau, which is also a chemical company. And so they came at me, and a state legislator from down in Baytown, which is in the chemical oil industry of our state down around Houston, said that the lobbyists for the Farm Bureau came up to him and said, "You got to be with us. We're gonna rein in this Hightower guy." And Ed Watson was his name, and Ed said to him, "So is this the deal? I'm either for the chemical industry or I'm for Hightower." And the lobbyist said, "Yes, that's it." And he said, "Well, put me down for Hightower." and that's the way I feel about this. Put me down for the children of our country, of our future. I mean, this is beyond comprehension to me. And the good news is we have the power because here we go. Here's the latest polling data. 70% of voters support increased congressional funding for child care, including 60% of Republican voters. 6 in 10 Americans in every age and educational group support increased funding for child care. 79% support a government guarantee of child care assistance to low-income middle-class families, including 67% of Republicans. 80% favor new care programs targeting rural and low-income areas where licensed care is scarce. 8 in 10 Americans favor offering pre-K public education to all 3 and 4-year-olds. 88%. I've been in politics. You don't get 88% easily. Right. 88%, including 80% of Republicans, support increasing worker pay to ensure that child care workers earn a living wage. We have the potential to make the change here, don't we, Bryce?
I mean, I wish I could feel the optimism that you're feeling right now. This is what's so frustrating to me about this current situation in Congress is it's just so divorced from what the American people want. Right. It's very clear that American families for a long time have been struggling with this crisis of childcare and trying to figure it out on their own, and that it is a popular thing to address this for them. That it's bipartisan. It's not, whether or not you can afford childcare doesn't respect blue or red lines. This is something that every family faces if they have working parents in it. And yet Congress just is acting as if there is no support for this. There's no mandate for this. If there's anything coming out of this pandemic that we've learned is that if you don't have access to childcare or school, which again, I believe is also a form of childcare, then everything grinds to a halt and your entire life is thrown into crisis. This is what a lot of families have been dealing with already, but the pandemic made it so clear how fundamental it is and how much we need to invest in it. And if we come out of this crisis failing to heed that call, then that's just such a pathetic failure.
Yeah. Well, it is really, and I think we have to absorb that. This is a failure. It's not like other countries haven't figured this out, right, Bryce?
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing is that this is not a difficult concept anywhere else in the world. Most other developed countries spend significant resources on the early years. When you look at a chart of developed countries, we're way down at the bottom. We only beat out a couple few. And
we're number last. We're number last.
We are right there at the bottom. And we're not just being beat by, the usual culprits, the Nordic countries. This is countries like Australia. This is countries like Germany, Latvia. Like we are just behind. And a lot of these other countries have systems. Not only do they invest the money, but they also make it easy for parents. There's a spot available for your kid when they're young. They are public, so they're high quality, and you just know that you can trust them, and you know where to send them to preschool when they're at that age. So it's not just that, it's available. It's that it's easy to access. It's good quality. You can rest assured. Like parents just don't have the mental burden of finding it and scrounging to afford it that American families do.
Well, and there's the hope right there. It's in the people themselves. There's no rational reason why we do not have top quality in the world healthcare in this richest country in the history of the world. for our children, healthcare and educational care through child care programs. And the good news is people are on the move. We showed that picture earlier of Brownsville, New York. New York. Oh, but it could be Brownsville anywhere. Of people rebelling, saying this healthcare works for us. It works for America. We need this. And now that same spirit, the same feistiness of American rebellion is exploding around the country. There's this wonderful group called Strolling Thunder. Can you believe it? Yes, strollers, children in strollers, being strolled up by moms and dads and other loved ones into state capitals to say healthcare. And that's what we have to do. We have to take power ourselves. We have the power. And we have to, I mean, Joe Manchin has to be told if he says, well, I'm not for healthcare. I'm sorry. I'm not for child. I'm for child education, but I'm not for child care. I would like to run against Joe Manchin and run an ad that says he's not for child care.
Yeah.
That is a losing stand for him to take. And why our Democratic Party is caving into him, I understand the technicalities of the logistics and the numbers and et cetera. But you got to take a stand. You can't just let these do-nothings stand in the way of what amounts to the future of our country. I mean, we say children are our future.
Whitney told us children are our future. Written by Dolly.
There you go. Dolly. Dolly herself, themselves. So why not invest in that future? Yeah. Why aren't we doing this?
I do want to point people to, I just put it up on screen. I'll throw it up again. Thinkbabies.org is a place where you can get involved to advocate for state-based and federal-based legislation. It's an initiative from the 0 to 3 organization, who we really, really love, and states all around the country, which we cover on earlylearningnation.com, just to plug that one more time. Bryce, you recently wrote about the Michigan initiative, which I'd really love to hear your perspective about. And but before I let you do that, I'm going to do my actual job, and I'm going to ask you all out there in TV land and web land, if you want more Hightower in your life, and who doesn't? Let's be real.
Of course.
Come sign up on our email list. It's hightowerlowdown.org/email. We also want to give a huge shout out to our friends at Free Speech TV, where we are airing on a regular basis and are partnered with, and really love working with everyone there. And I think that's all of the plugs that I have to do. But Bryce, tell us about Michigan.
Sure. Well, this is another interesting instance of conservatives getting in on childcare and trying to figure out solutions. In Michigan, they just started this pilot called the Tri-Share program. And basically what it does is, if an employer enrolls, the government picks up 1/3 of the cost of childcare, the employer picks up 1/3, and the parents pick up 1/3. So instead of you just being on the entire hook all by yourself to afford tens of thousands of dollars of childcare a year, you're sharing it with your government, your state government, and you're sharing it with your employer. And this came from, it's the brainchild of a conservative state lawmaker there, a Republican, who kept touring manufacturing plants and other workplaces and heard over and over childcare was a top workforce issue. You know, we cannot get the employees we need because our employees can't get the childcare they need. And so he was like, okay, so what can we do about it? And for him, it's a conservative approach, and it certainly is. He wants parents to, quote unquote, have skin in the game by covering some of the costs themselves. But employers also have some skin in the game. So they're, in theory, potentially going to push for good quality. They don't want to be helping to subsidize poor quality childcare with their dollars. And it's something they can use to try to attract people say, look, come work for us. We've got this tri-share benefit. So it's in the early stages, but it's a really interesting idea.
And now more than ever, because, corporations, chain stores, retailers, et cetera, are saying, well, we've got a labor shortage. Well, no. You've got a wage shortage.
Yes, here.
Some are addressing that. But two, you've got a child care shortage. Even a mom or a father wants to be able to work, but have childcare responsibility, then why don't we have childcare possibilities for them that are a public resource? And again, this is as valuable, I would dare say more valuable of a public resource than a bridge or than a sewer pipe, all of which are essential, but so is childcare. And that's what we have to fight for, I think, is just a level of common sense. And so we just, I think we don't have to create this movement. It's there because people know what a good childcare system would be because they're experiencing a bad one. And so it would be quite easy to rally those people into a movement. If we have a political party that will take at a national level for sure, but also at a state or even a local level. This doesn't all have to be done on a grand scale. Do it at your scale. Do it at your family scale. You can be a part of this solution. This is again, to me, I'm just furious about our failure as a society. And it is a failure. It's not just a corporate failure. It's not just a governmental failure, a Republican failure. It is a societal failure that we do not provide this most basic of needs for our people. We don't have to tolerate this. We are the people. So,
and I would just like to clarify one point, Hightower. You do not have children of your own. You are not planning on having children of your own. You have no skin in the game here. So I feel like if you're this angry about this issue, what are, parents experiencing this or whatever, but like, if you understand how deeply wrong this is, what is it about Joe Manchin? What is it about all of those people? And another, little factoid about Manchin, Bryce, you mentioned that they have universal pre-K in West Virginia. He supports it, and it's very popular because he differentiates between care and education, whatever.
Whatever.
And what's really interesting when you look in West Virginia, this is where some of the most severe cases are needed, of people really struggling hard and really trying to put food on the table, care in their homes, all of those things. We on Early Learning Nation, we had a recent story, a child care provider herself in West Virginia who is now advocating for paid leave for all because of her own experiences of not being able to run her daycare and the way that things have worked there, and all kinds of stuff. So it's like his own constituents are clamoring for this. So as mentioned was the comments with this kind of approval for these measures, these Linda, I believe, said that that our representatives are neither representing nor serving. So
Yes. Again, the overwhelming majority, 80-something% of American people are for this stuff. That needs to be shoved in the face of recalcitrant naysayers like Manchin or whoever. But I would add a dimension to what you just said, Deanna, and that is that Bryce herself is an example of this. Childcare is not just a matter of poor people. It is. Well, tell us, Bryce. Even relatively well off, certainly middle class, upper middle class people have a hard time finding childcare that is available and even affordable.
Yeah, this reaches really far up the income scale. This touches a lot of American families. My own experience, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and it's not even just being able to afford it, which, it is, if not the highest cost every month, almost, one of my highest costs with my family every month. But it's beyond that. It's also just being able to find just being the bare bones locating what providers are out there. There's no infrastructure, there's no system, there's Google, there's Yelp. And then when you find a provider, do they have a slot that's available for you? Are you able to evaluate what kind of quality they have? Is it a place that you feel will give your child the care and stimulation that they need? Unfortunately, odds are in this country, it may not be very high quality care. It's really expensive to provide really high quality care, and we are not putting much money into the system. So it's not just the cost, although it very much is the cost that families of many different income levels really struggle to deal with. It's also just the logistics of finding it and being able to trust it.
Well, yeah, and
I was going to jump in and ask a couple of things here.
Go away.
From our user comments. We actually have Ruth, who is in Austin, Nebraska. Did not know there was an Austin, Nebraska.
Where is that?
Peace.
Let's get together.
Yeah, let's make the Austin melds happen, Ruth.
Yeah.
But Ruth is wondering what other Western countries do, or other developed countries, or countries that do have good childcare. Like, what do those systems look like, and what can we learn from them? And sort of piggybacking onto that, if anybody knows, either of you know, Jackie over on YouTube wants to know if there are companies that are providing good examples of what good childcare policies look like, or subsidizing that work in any way. So what do y'all think? Countries and companies.
Go ahead, Bryce.
Well, I'll answer the last one first, which is, it's a kind of a short answer. I think there are some companies that have tried, but a lot have quickly found that it's not a great role for them to play. Places have tried, for example, to have on-site childcare, but a lot of companies quickly realize, and this was the case in Michigan too, of that state lawmaker when he talked to employers. Some had tried to do on-site childcare, and they're like, we don't know anything about childcare. What we really need is for there to be high quality options run by somebody else that Our workers can afford. So, some employers often offer some backup childcare subsidies and things like that, and that's great that they do. But the best role they can play is in supporting legislation that would create a system for everybody.
And other countries have done this, and it should not be up to corporation. I don't want my child, whom I don't have, but if I did have a child, I don't want the child to be in corporate care, an entity that doesn't know anything about it or fundamentally care, because they've got to care about their bottom line more than anything else. So we have to have a public system, and we have to acknowledge childcare is expensive. If you're a parent, you know that already. But to then extend that to a community, it's again, if you're not going to just feed and water the little critters, but you're going to try to nurture them.
I mean, even just feeding them is expensive. Let's be real.
Well, there's that. Yeah. Then it's going to cost money, and we have money. We are a nation awash in money.
Maeve also just made a great point about this, that there's a lot of family care that is not accounted for, where there are grandparents, right. Family members, neighbors, sisters, brothers, taking care of kids, and everybody pooling resources. And that's certainly not unusual, but it's also, and it's fantastic. It should be well supported. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to an advocacy group in supporting family-based childcare and in-home childcare called Homegrown, who we really love. But I'm losing my train of thought, and that's
Well,
totally
let me
fine.
attach to your train.
Okay.
There, with this thought, which we've not addressed, but is really a crucial issue in childcare, and that is that childcare is not a 9 to 5 proposition. There are people who work night shifts. There are people who work weekends. Childcare has got to be 24/7, 365 days of the year for it to work, for it to deliver what its enormous potential is, which is a society, a democratic society that can govern itself and can advance the possibilities of all of its people.
Yeah. Well, like you said, the World War II universal childcare was open 12 hours a day. There was a movement in the 70s around the time of the universal childcare bill to have 24/7 childcare available on demand. These are ideas I think we need to be bringing back. Like you said, a lot of people don't work 9 to 5. They work irregular schedules.
Yeah.
I just dropped in the comments a link to a documentary film that folks can check out called Through the Night, which is about overnight childcare worker and all of the or owner and all of the things that she faces. Linda also mentions, I'm going to throw it up on the screen here, that the first 5 years of a child's life are the most critical for forming fundamental structures in their brains. We call it brain building. And if we are not invested in that work, we are sorely losing out on future generations. Jay asked earlier what regular people can do to get involved in this besides harass Joe Manchin, maybe. I've put some links to Think Babies, to the Care Can't Wait Coalition, a couple of other things in the comments. But if y'all have recommendations or thoughts about who we can go to start working on this and who you would recommend, we're all ears.
Exactly. That is so good. And that's a good point to end our conversation here tonight, is that, we can browbeat Joe Manchin, but that's not going to do any good. Rather, we can invest in these groups, the Care Can't Wait Coalition, Moms Rising, and all the other grassroots groups that are actually trying to do something here and to build something. Again, it doesn't have to be a national law. You can do it in your own hometown. To some degree, you can do it in your own neighborhood. But do something, because this, I mean, I can't express my frustration enough, but except to say, we're bigger than this. Good God, we can't even take care of our children.
There's a woman on Twitter yesterday, an expert named Melissa Botich, I'm not sure how to say her last name, who said, we are born into this world needing care, and we leave this world often needing care. And there's many times in our lives in between where we need care. Why are we not prioritizing care in our work?
That's good enough. Thank you, Bryce Covert, for all the work you are doing and the advocacy and the insights and direction that you're offering to us. Do more of it, because we can win this fight because the American people are overwhelmingly in favor of it. So let's do it. Thank you, Bryce Covert. Thanks for being with us. And thanks to all of you for tuning in with us tonight. We'll be back with you later with another Hightower Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew.